Jumping in for a quick note on sound quality, everyone is home right now. I had time to myself this morning, but there was some sort of road work happening nearby, and it was extremely loud. So this is better than that. I apologize, though. We're on to part 3 of this story, and I'll be damned if I know exactly how this ends, but I'm getting glimpses. As for scheduling, I think we can look towards the week of June 3rd for the 4th and final installment of There You Are. Early in that week or late, I can't say, but we'll wrap this thing up one way or another before that week ends. Now, when we last left Jane, she just arrived at her new home, the home where Peter grew up, where her late mother-in-law, Barbara, befriended a forest fairy. Chapter 10. The seclusion is serene, Joel murmured, staring out at Lake Ontario through the bedroom's large picture window. There were whitecaps on the water, with heavy gray skies above. The trees beside the house whipped in a strong wind. Jane didn't respond. She was numb. Even her rage felt fuzzy, just out of reach. She must have slept the previous night because when she opened her eyes, she could have screamed at the nightmare of waking up beside him. It was their 4th morning in the cabin. They'd fallen into a rigid routine the previous days and nights, but that 3rd night, he didn't dress her in the pink pajamas after the bath. She had never felt hatred so strongly. She never thought she could feel such utter disgust. She wanted to rip her skin off and step out of it, a gleaming skeleton, stabbing out his eyes with her finger bones. She could see it as if it were happening, and then her mind stilled and did something strange. She hadn't recited the prayer since she was a child, and then, compulsively, begging for help, for forgiveness, for deliverance. Her mind would loop the Hail Mary over and over, an attempt to soothe, to calm her. Jane and her siblings attended Catholic Mass every Sunday, clean up, smile, hide reality from the congregation. Their father only attended occasionally, as always making excuses for their mother's temper, the family pretending her dark mood wasn't due to another hangover. Jane never trusted God. She pictured him like her dad, smiling blandly down at her while offering zero practical help, and she was deeply suspicious of Jesus, not trusting the come one, come all sales pitch, all while promising to come back on a horse with fire eyes to rain down hell on non-believers. That promise of vengeance didn't line up with the lovey-dovey Christian coloring pages in the church's children's room. Jane desperately wanted someone to take the pressure off her, for someone else to come and worry over her little brother and sister, to protect them from her mother's wrath. She certainly wasn't about to beg those supernatural skymen for help. But one person in catechism stood out to her. Mary seemed trustworthy. Jane was horrified by what had happened to her. She knew they weren't being given the whole story either. But Mary seemed strong, solid, practical. Mary, please come help us. Please send someone to make my mother happy, she would pray when she was young, apologizing for not being perfect, hoping mercy would be given to Carrie and Teddy. Jane promising to take any punishment necessary. But please, someone, just come. Trapped. That had been the overwhelming feeling of her childhood. Trapped and wishing for someone to come and save her. Hail Mary, full of grace, her mind looped. That 3rd night in the cabin. Carrie helped Jane bring the suitcases into the house. The rest of their belongings could wait until morning. Jane dropped her bag at the bottom of the stairs as Carrie went straight into the kitchen. The house hadn't changed since the last time they'd visited. The round dining table, still covered in a bright floral runner, sat in the dining room to the left of the entrance. The living room, which ran the full length of the house, to her right. Peeking her head in, she took in the taupe couch lined with fluffed, neutral pillows, the fireplace, its mantel cluttered with picture frames and curios. A door beyond the hearth led to a small, window-lined office with low bookshelves. She followed Carrie into the kitchen at the back of the house. It was separated from the dining room by a peninsula counter with stools. Carrie stood by the kitchen sink, which lay beneath a large picture window that overlooked the yard, a low, ancient stone wall separating it from the woods of Hale Reservation beyond. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that about my mom," Carrie offered, handing her a glass of water. Jane waved away the apology and accepted the glass. "It's so weird," Carrie went on. I forget that she's gone, and I think, oh, I need to stop by the house to check on her, and then I remember. She trailed off. I'm just so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're keeping the house. I can't imagine having it sold to strangers. I just wish we'd made the move sooner, Jane assured her. It's a lot. I mean, it's a huge change, but now that we're here, I feel relieved. Peter's excited to be back, and this house is just so comforting, so cozy. As she rambled on, she could hear her mother-in-law's wind chimes tinkling from the back porch. What are the kids up to? She asked, changing the subject. Carrie and Steve had 2 children, a 5-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. With their sitter. I'd say it's because I wanted you guys to have a chill arrival, but really, I just need a break. Well, now that we're here, we're always happy to babysit. Carrie smiled, but didn't acknowledge the offer. It's a happy house, she said. It was a good place to grow up. Peter and I literally spent hours in those woods back there. She laughed at the memory. You'll make this place your own over time. I don't want you to think that I have any opinion about it at all. This is 100% your place now. Jane smiled in thanks, feeling awkward. Carrie chuckled, pointing to a large wooden bowl filled to the brim with rose quartz crystals. I did go ahead and gather those up, not sure what we're going to do with them, but I was pretty sure you wouldn't want them cluttered along every surface. That's what your mom had along the windowsills? Yep, and I think she buried a bunch in the yard, too. Did she say why? Carrie glanced at her, then looked out through the French doors that led out to the porch. To extend its reach. Jane's mind immediately drew up the memory of those ice-cold woods, Joel hunting her, the creature before her blocking her way, ultimately pointing her in the right direction. It was only a coincidence. Barbara's dementia run amok in her poor mind. All the same, she didn't want to hear another word about her mother-in-law's forest fairy. Let's set the table, she said, finally, digging through the cabinets and drawers for plates and placemats. When the guys returned with dinner, they settled around the dining room table, pizza boxes piled on the counter. Have you gone through Mom's stuff? Peter asked his sister. Of course not, Carrie replied. Take anything you want, Care, he insisted, honestly. Mom left us each what she thought was fair, Carrie argued. Don't be silly, Peter argued back. You get first dibs here, right? He looked at Jane for confirmation. Absolutely, she agreed. Carrie exchanged a look with her husband. Maybe some of her jewelry? All yours, Peter said before taking a bite of pizza. You sure? Carrie directed the question toward Jane. Of course, Jane said honestly. It didn't even occur to me that you wouldn't have that and anything else you wanted. Except the grill. You can't have the grill, Peter corrected, covering his mouth so they wouldn't see the half-chewed pizza. I can't wait to use that thing. Deal, Carrie laughed. The mosquitoes were brutal this summer, Steve pointed out. It's because of the creek, Peter said. I'll give you a couple of our citronella tiki torches. It'll be too cold for the suckers soon, but while they're out, they're a lifesaver. Barbara wouldn't accept them. Why not? Asked Jane. Steve and Carrie exchanged a look. Forest fairy? Guessed Peter. Chapter 11. This is weird, Peter commented, staring up at the ceiling. Maybe we should have painted the room or gotten a new bed or something. Probably, she agreed. Exhausted, they'd fallen into bed the previous night without much conversation. Waking up in her mother-in-law's perfectly preserved room did feel strange. Jane was used to sleeping down the hall in the twin beds of Peter's childhood room when they came for a visit. Let's go shopping today, he said, cuddling in behind her. For a new bed? Sure. That's silly, we'll just swap out our bedding. Jane was surprised to find how little she wanted to change the house. Barbara had been such a warm and comforting figure. She'd crafted the cottage into a cozy little haven over the years, layering warmth and personality as she did. Little had changed since Peter's father had died of a heart attack about 5 years prior, except for that little office on the first floor. Originally, it had belonged to Peter's dad, a criminal defense attorney. Not long after he passed, Barbara had lined the walls with bright floral wallpaper, cleared the file folders from the low bookshelves beneath the wall-to-wall windows overlooking the side yard, cluttered the desktop with her signature bric-a-brac, and placed a cozy chair and stool in the corner. Peter planned to convert his old bedroom into an office, which meant the nook belonged to Jane now. She sat in the office armchair, a cup of hot chocolate warming her hands, staring out at the backyard. On this side of the house, the grass extended only about 15 or so feet to the low stone wall that lined the yard, separating it from the forest beyond. It was early October, and the leaves were a variety of orange and red, with a backdrop of green pine. She was grateful they'd left the city before the 1-year anniversary of her abduction. The cool gray weather in Syracuse had been dredging up sense memories for weeks. At least in Dover, the skies were a clear, bright blue, dotted with big, white, fluffy clouds. The perpetually gray skies of Syracuse were far behind her. A particularly bright red maple drew her eyes, and as she studied it, 2 chipmunks scurried along the stone wall beneath. She sipped from her mug and realized she might actually feel slightly relaxed. A big, fluffy brown rabbit hopped into view and began nibbling away at the grass. Jane stood to get a closer look. The rabbit's ears twitched, and the animal turned its head toward the trees. She followed its gaze, watching as branches began to move in a soft breeze, their leaves falling free. Jane looked back down at the rabbit, who had begun to thump its back feet on the ground. Their neighbors growing up had kept rabbits, and Jane recognized the action as a warning of danger to other bunnies nearby. Jane peered into the trees as the bunny scurried across the lawn. The wind picked up, and branches waved to and fro, though one set of branches not far past the edge of the woods stood still, resisting the breeze while the branches around them swayed. She stepped closer to the window, and just then an arm reached around her shoulders, pulling her back. She screamed, struggling to get away. Peter released her immediately. "Babe, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," he reassured her. "I shouldn't have snuck up on you like that. I thought you heard me." No, Jane said, returning the apology while trying to calm her breathing. "I thought I saw something. In the woods, I thought—" "Probably a deer," Peter reasoned, gazing out the window. "The woods are lousy with them." Jane nodded, sparing another glance out the window. "What time is your call with Andrea?" asked Peter. "Noon," Jane answered, aware her reaction to being startled had frightened him. "I was thinking we could grab groceries in town and maybe bring home lunch from Booker's. I want you to meet Gabby and Mia." She tried to hide her hesitation. "Carrie and I went to high school with them. Trust me, they're solid." Jane forced herself to smile. "Sure." She didn't want to go. She didn't want to leave the house. She wanted to unpack the truck and get settled and make lunch at home. But she knew she should agree. She should want to meet Peter's old friends, to begin to grow a social circle here. But she didn't want a social circle. She wanted to hole up in her mother-in-law's carefully curated cozy home with the alarm on and the world locked out. But this was supposed to be a fresh start, a new town, a new life. "I'll just go get changed," she told him. It was a pretty winding drive along tree-lined roads into town. Booker's Sandwiches and Stuff was housed in a standalone building just down the street from Dover's town hall. "There's the library," Peter pointed out as they drove, "and Duncan." Jane smiled. "You're such a masshole." "Guilty," he laughed, pulling into a parking spot in front of Booker's. In they went. To Jane's dismay, the layout was strikingly similar to Marshall Street Deli, where she'd ordered countless grilled cheese and tomato sandwiches from Joel Vincent Hayes. A short line of people stood waiting for their turn at Booker's glass-encased tall counter filled with deli meats and cheeses. A young man was fielding orders behind the case. Another made sandwiches on a counter behind him. Above head were open shelves filled with a variety of bread and roll options. Past the register sat several booths and tables. The counter was far too familiar, but the seating area was different from Joel's deli. Jane chose to focus her attention there. Along with her anxiety, she felt anger rising, hatred for the way Joel poisoned her every moment. "There he is," a woman Jane hadn't noticed declared, moving from behind the register and making a beeline for them. She wrapped Peter in a hug. "I'm so sorry about your mom, Pete. She was a really cool lady." "Thanks," he replied. Then, "Gabby, this is my wife, Jane." "Awesome," she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around Jane, who stiffened under her grasp. "Sorry, I'm a hugger," the woman apologized. "Mia!" she yelled. We've been so excited to meet you, and you have to join our book club. Carrie comes. It's once a month, strictly paranormal romance titles. We're burning through Molly Harper's Half Moon Hollow series. Have you read it? Jane shook her head, but before she could respond, Gabby rushed on. Good. We're only on book 3, so you can totally catch up, no problem. Pete, a short woman with a head full of brown curls, said warmly, Are you here for good? We are, he replied, leaning down to hug her. This is Jane, Gabby enthused. Mia held out a hand to shake. We have a bunch of embarrassing stories to tell you about Pete. Fantastic, Jane laughed. Mia offered her condolences to Peter, and they settled into one of the booths while Gabby relayed their orders to one of the guys behind the counter. She refused their money. On the house. Welcome to Dover, she told them. As was her habit, Jane chose a seat against a wall so she could face the door and keep her eye on the other customers. But she found it difficult to keep up her usual vigilance in the face of Gabby and Mia's happy chatter. They peppered them with questions about the move and Jane's job and insisted that they come over for a cookout along with Carrie and Steve before the weather turned and they had to store the grill in the garage. And when they caught Peter up on the cringy fate of old high school classmates, Jane even found herself laughing along with them. Chapter 12. Will they miss you at the deli? I left that job 2 months ago, he replied, topping off her coffee mug. He sighed and took the seat across from her. I'm hurt you didn't even notice. Jane eyed him, afraid to respond. He smiled. I forgive you, and look. He scooched his seat forward. I understand this is all a major adjustment. Jane shook her head. You have to let me go. He leaned forward slowly, his eyes blank and dead as a shark's. She pulled back as far as her seat would allow. You will adjust, he said in a low voice. No one is coming. No one will find us here. And if they did, I'd rather we both die than let them take you from me. He stared into her face, unblinking, then abruptly pulled back. This is your life now, he said, his tone practical. You will acclimate. She just stared, furious with herself for her inability to stop shaking. It goes without saying that there's no use in running, Joel assured her. By her count, they'd been in the cabin for 7 or 8 days, or maybe it was more. They'd adopted such a strict routine that it was impossible to differentiate one day from another. The woods are dense and unforgiving. The water's freezing this time of year. The ex-owner of this cabin used to brag about going months without seeing another soul. I can attest to it. I've spent a lot of time here, especially after I took ownership of this place. And you know what? No one came looking for him. Peter's agent had called on the way back to the house with good news. The contract for his new book proposal they'd been pinging back and forth with a publisher had been finalized. All parties agreed upon the terms. Now Peter had to print it and sign it and scan it back to the agent. It was mid-morning on a Friday. It was best to get it back to the lawyers as soon as possible. Get things on record. Time kills deals, Peter's agent always reminded him. Unfortunately, the printer and office supplies were buried deep in the back of the rental truck. We'll go over to the library and I'll use their printer when you're done with your call, he offered. Jane considered for a moment. You should go now. I know it's a rush. I'll be fine. Are you sure? Jane forced a smile. Totally. We'll set the alarm, Peter began. I'm fine, really. You're going to go out of town next week, right? I have to get used to the idea of being here alone sometime. Might as well start now. I thought you'd stay at Carrie's while I was gone. Jane shook her head. Carrie has enough going on. She doesn't need to deal with her mentally ill sister-in-law on top of it. You're not mentally ill, Peter protested. Oh, no? Well, what would you call it? I'd call it tough as nails, he said, pulling her into a hug. A fighter, a survivor. Jane pulled away. She hated that word, and she hated it even more when people used it to describe her, as if she had a choice. If Joel had killed her, they would have called her a victim, but because she managed to physically escape the cabin, everyone considered her a survivor, as if physical survival meant something. Just because her body wasn't in that cabin didn't mean that her mind had ever escaped. You should get going, she told him, hiding her irritation. I'd better get set up in your mom's office to talk to Andrea. He hesitated before giving her a kiss on the cheek. If you're sure, I promise I'll be quick. It'll be good to test out the alarm system, she replied. Jane had propped her phone against a pile of books on the desk in the office. Smiling back at Andrea's enthusiastic greeting, she assured her that the move had gone smoothly and they were settling in well. It's nice here. A nice, calm, quiet house, she told the therapist. I'm actually home alone right now. Really? Jane replied, eyebrows raised. How does it feel? Scary, Jane admitted, but manageable. We had a security system installed, all the bells and whistles. I'd know if anyone was trying to break in. Andrea nodded. Where's Peter? He needed a printer. We don't have his office set up yet. Got it. Well, the view behind you is absolutely stunning. Jane glanced over her shoulder at the large windows, the trees gently swaying in the sunshine. I've already seen a bunch of bunnies and chipmunks, and I'm pretty sure I saw a deer this morning. Peter says there are a ton of them in the area. Very cool, Andrea replied. So, how are you holding up? Really? Jane sighed. I think this is going to work out. I do. I think I might be able to feel safe here. Andrea nodded, but did not speak, forcing Jane to continue. I mean, I know the move isn't going to magically solve all my problems, but I can't tell you what a relief it was to not wake up in that apartment. To know that I never have to see Audiobox again, that I never have to drive past Marshall Street. I realize now that I was constantly being reminded of what happened. He was around every corner in Syracuse. That makes perfect sense. How could you move forward if the environment you were in put you in a constant state of fight or flight? Right, Jane agreed. So, now that some space has been created for you to take a breath and evaluate what life could be like in Massachusetts, what do you... Andrea stopped abruptly and leaned toward her screen, squinting. What's up? Jane asked, thinking there was something wrong on Andrea's end of the call. The therapist laughed. Peter wasn't kidding about the deer. I think there might be a buck in your yard. I just saw a huge rack of antlers pass by the windows right behind you. Jane stood and pushed her chair back, uneasy. I don't see anything in the yard, she said, peering out the windows. Behind her, Andrea explained, it moved from left to right, in front of those trees. Jane scanned the yard. It must have been moving fast. It's gone now. She glanced toward the trees beyond the low stone fence. Do you see it? Asked Andrea. Jane peered through the dense greenery. There was movement. Something large and solid moved purposefully through the trees. She turned and picked up the phone and carried it into the family room, closing the office door firmly behind her. Are you all right? Andrea asked. Jane nodded, moving to the front door to make sure the alarm was engaged. I'm fine, she replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. Too much nature too soon, she explained, forcing a laugh as she climbed the steps to the second floor. I guess you're not in the city anymore, said Andrea. Jane closed and deadbolted the bedroom door and forced herself to continue the therapy session. Sitting in an armchair her mother-in-law had arranged in a corner, she tried to focus the conversation on her business and moving forward in life, not focusing on the past. She felt herself slipping into the corner of her mind where she'd managed her interactions with Joel, walls up, anticipating what he wanted to hear, watchful, careful. She could tell Andrea sensed something was off, but she didn't care. Even if everything wasn't okay, she needed Andrea to believe it was. When she finally ended the call, she forced herself to look out the bedroom window overlooking the backyard and forest beyond. The autumn leaves obscured her view from this angle. If the forest monster was still there, she couldn't see it. Chapter 13. It was just another morning. Jane was fuzzy on how long she'd been in the cabin. Maybe 2 weeks, maybe more. Try as she might, the numbing, disorienting effects of Joel's strict routine was beginning to break her. Every day was the same. Same food, same drinks, same activities. Wake up, change into daytime clothes, a pink short-sleeve pocket t-shirt and skinny jeans for Jane, and a blue button-down and khakis for Joel. The clothes washed before dinner, transferred to the dryer after. Next, sit quietly while Joel read a chapter of Perrault over coffees. They were on to Murder on the Orient Express now. Breakfast of eggs, cheese, red peppers and onions, and 1 slice of whole grain toast at 9:30 a.m., followed by 10 laps around the house, Joel walking beside her, holding onto a literal dog leash he attached to the zip ties around her wrists. She was not allowed a jacket. 2 glasses of water while they watched an episode of How I Met Your Mother, lunchtime, grilled cheese with tomato, only 1 slice of cheese, bread lightly coated with butter, and a berry-flavored seltzer water for Jane. Clam chowder from a can with 7 saltines for Joel. Back outside, this time for 20 laps around the house. Inside for an episode of Modern Family and 2 more glasses of water. Afternoon siesta. Side by side on the bed, Jane chained to the post, sometimes dozing, sometimes laying in silent rage as Joel snored gently beside her. Get up, brush teeth, chapter of Perrault, dinner, salad with tomatoes, carrots, onions, and grilled chicken. Dressing on the side. Just a tiny bit goes so far with each bite. 10 laps, bath, 5 or so minutes of unspeakable horror, 1 more chapter of Perrault, then lights out. She was losing herself, losing hope. She tried to hold on to her rage, but she was hungry and cold all the time, exhausted, sad, enraged, terrified, disgusted. That particular day differed only in one detail. She only wore the pink t-shirt. The jeans hadn't dried properly in the dryer the night before, a fact that had enraged Joel. But their schedule must continue. The jeans would be retrieved when they were done with their meal. "How's your coffee?" Joel asked, the question a challenge. He was spreading a thin layer of butter on their slices of toast. She offered a tight-lipped smile and sipped the burning hot, bitter liquid. The sooner she got it down, the sooner the ritual would be over. "We only have 2 chapters left. I wonder if we might move on to And Then There Were None this afternoon." There was a tapping at the window, pulling his attention away. "Don't move," he warned her, before darting out of the room. She heard the front door open and immediately began pulling at the zip ties on her wrist. She heard Joel shout. She froze, listening. When she didn't hear anything else, she let her eyes scan the room. He'd left the butter knife on the table. She'd never told Peter about the monster. How could she? Now, how was she going to explain that she'd seen its hulking tree-like body walking through the woods behind their home? Peter was on the phone with his agent when he came back into the house. She heard the door open and the beeping of the alarm as he disabled it. She unlocked the deadbolt on the bedroom door as quietly as she could and went downstairs to the alarm panel to re-engage it. It felt as if she were moving through a fog, dissociating like she had in the cabin. Andrea called it a coping mechanism, her brain allowing her to handle significant amounts of stress. Jane felt it was the opposite, the fuzzy feeling reflecting her inability to cope with reality, her brain slowing down, unable to process anything. Peter smiled at her from the kitchen and held up a finger, indicating he'd be on the phone for only a moment longer. She nodded in acknowledgement and moved to sit at the dining room table, the edge of her sweater catching the corner of a file folder Peter must have just dropped onto the kitchen peninsula as she moved past. The folder fell, its contents fanning out across the floor. "Shit," she muttered, kneeling down to pick up the papers, only faintly noticing Peter's quick insistence to his agent that he had to go, that he'd call him back. As Jane collected the papers, she realized they must be the printed documents his agent needed him to sign. She picked up what looked like the first page of a book proposal. Written in bold beneath Peter's name were the words, "Working title, Grilled Cheese with Tomato, a true crime story of stalking and survival." A spike of fear tightened her chest. This can't be what it looks like, she reasoned. But as her eyes scanned the page and Peter's synopsis of the intended manuscript, she knew it was exactly what it looked like. "Jane," Peter pleaded. She glanced up at him, then back at the papers. Her hand shook as she scanned a page. On it was an outline of Peter's proposed manuscript that included several quotes from interviews he'd apparently already conducted. Shelley Burns was quoted as saying, "Oh, she looked like hell. Stick thin and shaking in that muddy pink t-shirt. I'll never get that image out of my mind. I don't even want to think about what happened to her in that cabin." Jane was vaguely aware that Peter had knelt down in front of her, was saying her name. Peter's next book was about her, was about Joel, was about Peter's experience throughout what the contract termed the ordeal, and how he'd stood strong against suspicion to save his wife. "You didn't save me," Jane said quietly, suddenly filled with rage. "I saved me." "Please," he pleaded, "let me explain. I didn't want to mention any of this to you until it was a sure thing. There's really high interest in—" "When did you interview that woman?" she demanded. "Who?" "The goddamn gas station attendant who helped me after I escaped," she screamed. He opened his mouth to speak, then seemed to think better of it. "A few weeks ago." "When the hell did you go to Hendersonville?" He didn't respond. "You weren't in Salt Lake City, were you? There is no Salt Lake murder case. You've been working on this, on my story." "Again, I didn't think it was worth mentioning until it was a sure thing. I knew it would upset you." "Upset me? Upset me?" she seethed, standing up. "Where the fuck are you going next week? Are you going back to Syracuse?" Peter stood as well, and Jane took a step back away from him. "Yes," he admitted. "I'm going to interview more people connected to your case." "I can't believe this. Babe, what if this were something we worked on together? What if—" "You're kidding me." Peter threw up his hands in frustration. "You know this didn't just happen to you, Jane. How do you think it felt to be suspected of killing your wife and hiding her body? Do you know people still give me the side eye even though you're back?" "That must be very difficult for you," she said in a low voice. "I'm not trying to compare at all. I'm just saying, Jane, you were gone for 3 weeks. We thought the worst. We thought you were dead. The police thought I had something to do with it. And I mean, they haven't even found the guy. Do you even know that there are full-on Reddit threads devoted to proving that I hired Joel to abduct you?" Jane froze, a chill traveling through her body. Her hands clenched themselves into fists. Her ears went numb with panic. "Did you?" she said finally. "How can you even ask me that?" Peter demanded. She held his gaze and took a step towards him. "Jane, no, of course I didn't. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the book, but you have to know that I would never do anything to hurt you." She turned away from him, heading for the front door, then remembered what she'd seen in the backyard. She turned for the stairs instead, going straight for the bedroom, bolting the door behind her. Hey, before I go, I wanted to take the briefest of moments to remind everyone that my 2 books, Claire and Lilith, are available in paperback on Amazon and in audiobook format on Audible. Also on Patreon at the $5 a month level, the Ghosts and the Burbs episodes are available without all the intro and outro chatter, so you can enjoy the creepy stories and avoid my rambling. There You Are will also live on Patreon once it's finally complete. All is one file, so you'll be able to listen to it in its entirety, again, without opening chatter like this from me. One last thing, if you haven't, please follow the podcast on Instagram. It's the best place to get scheduling updates, though I admit, you can't always trust them. Okay, that's all. See you next time.